Hey guys, that's Angelo, and it's actually happening. We are getting Shadow Priest changes which are on the scale of, well, pretty much a rework, which will be rolled out very soon on the Shadowlands Beta. The community has put a tremendous amount of effort into seeking out some Shadow Priest changes, and Blizzard has definitely, and I mean definitely, listened and delivered. We will find out throughout this video whether or not for the better or for the worse, but in any way you can be incredibly excited. The Shadow Priest is seeing an incredible, and really an incredible amount of changes, from the removal of talents like Dark Ascension or Shadowy Insight, and even the removal of Shadow Word Void, can you believe it? And the implementation of brand new passives, talents, and game mechanics, and we'll be going over all of them step by step now. Okay, I know we're all pretty excited, so without any further ado, let's go right ahead and have a look. Okay, since we don't have any icons yet of any of these new spells and features, I will refrain from my typical video art style and not show you any icons and pictures, but much rather we'll go over the exact changes of the spec step by step along with the blue post and explaining their actual outcome on the spec while doing so. I will shy away from my personal thoughts until the end, but will throw an occasional opinion into the mix whenever I think it's plausible. Linksy, a community manager at Blizzard, has officially posted these changes 7 minutes before I'm recording this, so you're getting them directly from the source. He says that Blizzard has heard the feedback on Shadow Priests and spent some time performing more extensive changes to the spec, including changes to baseline skills and talents. Most importantly, they've taken a deeper look at Voidform, so let's go ahead and start off right there. Along with Insanity, Voidform was introduced in Legion as a central component of Shadow Priest redesigns, or rather of the Shadow Priest redesign that explored the fantasy of tapping into dark, mind-twisting void magic for temporary power. From a gameplay standpoint, this was expressed as building up Insanity, entering Voidform, then battling against decaying Insanity to prolong your time in this powerful state. This design has not been a, well, clear winner for several players, as we often receive feedback that people do not enjoy fighting the resource decay in order to inflict reasonable damage. On the other hand, we also hear from people who enjoy Voidform but feel it's not transformative enough. Over time, the design has proved problematic and Voidform uptime has dominated the spec, going far beyond our original intention. Now, any talents, items, legendaries, etc. that do not feed into Voidform are considered undesirable, and this is incredibly true. We want time in Voidform to feel more impactful, and as a result, we are limiting the time you can undergo the transformation by applying a cooldown. By default, the ability will no longer have the decaying resource mechanic, so your insanity is not going to drain, but that gameplay will become more appropriately placed in the redesigned talent of Legacy of the Void, so that players can have the option to choose the legacy feel of the Voidform. Okay, so this means a multitude of things. Firstly, Insanity will now not be a draining resource anymore baseline, which essentially lets Insanity be the same as Shadow Orbs were previously in Warlords of Draenor and earlier. Insanity in and of itself will now be a builder and spender system, which is arguably a quite welcome change, while with Legacy of the Void, we can choose to revert back to old playstyles of Legion and Battle for Azeroth, well, at least while we have our Voidform not being on cooldown. Many of you guys will experience a brand new spec here through this change alone, especially so if you don't play Shadow Priest before, or rather if you haven't played the Shadow Priest before Legion. So if you haven't played him in Warlords of Draenor and earlier, again, this will perhaps be a brand new priest for you. For everyone that did play back then, again, just remember that Insanity is now essentially the same as Shadow Orbs and will construct a builder and spender playstyle for us, revolving of course around Devouring Plague. We'll get into Legacy of the Void later on in this video. Okay, so let's move on to Devouring Plague. Feedback suggested the duration of Devouring Plague was too long. While we reduced the duration from its historic 21-second duration to 12 seconds, we agree that this still feels too long, so we're reducing it further down to 6 seconds. We've also fixed bugs that prevented Devouring Plague from scaling with haste or critical strike, and we've also increased its damage, finally. This is a very nice change in my opinion, again because of more than one reason. First of all, This allows Devouring Plague to do exactly what it was intended to do when it was re-implemented on the Shadowlands Alpha, and that is to provide a proper damage ability that can be used without really having to ramp up a lot. Of course, ramp up is not going to be the same anymore now, but there is of course still some ramping up involved. With Devouring Plague being on a 12-second duration, its full damage potential was honestly just too long extended, and this should ideally fix that. This change also makes the spec feel a bit less frustrating in the long run, and especially so more engaging, because the more haste we will be getting, the easier it will become to get the required 50 insanity to spend on Devouring Plague, meaning that this 6-second window is way more in line with our playstyle rather than a 12-second window, which would kind of again be very frustrating. Me and many other priests have voiced our concerns with Devouring Plague before, so again it's great to see some changes happening. The fact that Devouring Plague now scales with haste and critical strike properly is good, but I kinda expected that to come in time anyway, because it doesn't make a lot of sense not to have it scale with these two incredibly important stats. Now it also scales with our mastery, of course, just keep that in mind. Okay, let's take a dive into the updates to the general gameplay and of course our talents, and let me tell you that the amount of changes honestly only gets greater from here on out. We're introducing a new passive called Dark Thoughts that adds a baseline proc in the rotation, which we feel spices up the general rotation. We want damage over time effects to matter to Shadow Priests, so we've made it so Dark Thoughts and other mechanics interact with that core theme. We will look at Dark Thoughts in of course just a moment. Now when looking at talents, we've gone through a number of talents that made adjustments in an effort to make choices a bit more competitive in a variety of situations. Unfurling Darkness and Psychic Link support Shadow Priest's multi-dotting strength, both of those of course are new talents, while Damnation and Surrender to Madness provide tools for Shadow Priests to quickly burst targets down when the encounter demands it. Lastly, we want to spotlight the new talent, Searing Nightmare. Searing Nightmare can assist Shadow Priests in situations like Mythic Plus, where higher sustained AoE could be useful. Again, we'll take a look at that in just a moment as well, everything step by step. Now after we've heard the new design philosophies, let's go ahead and get into the details. Okay, so Void Eruption's cast time is reduced by 40%. Mind Blast at rank 2 reduces the cooldown of Mind Blast by 7.5 seconds, which was previously only 7 seconds. Now this will fix the weird global cooldown downtime that we would otherwise have without Shadow Word Void, since that has been removed, and I have discussed that in a previous video of mine where I talked about the Shadow Priest issues on the alpha. Shadow Word Death no longer generates any insanity. Shadowy apparitions are redesigned. When you use Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, or Void Bolt, you also create a shadowy version of yourself that floats towards all targets afflicted by your vampiric touch, dealing shadow damage. Critical strikes will cause 2 shadowy apparitions to be created. Those are very nice changes, as this gives our shadowy apparitions more strength, and again without having to either rely on talents or external powers, and they can proc multiple times naturally, increasing the more critical strike of course you have. Okay, Voidform now has a 90-second cooldown, and now increases damage by 20% and lasts for 15 seconds. Voidform no longer reduces the cooldown of Mind Blast, but now refreshes the cooldown of Mind Blast, and you gain 2 charges while within Voidform. You no longer gain haste every 0.5 seconds while in Voidform though, and this is important, and again shows that Voidform will not be the center of our gameplay anymore at all. It will simply be a cooldown from here on out, but with nice gameplay aspects, especially once paired with Legacy of the Void, as we will see. Devouring Plague's duration is reduced to 6 seconds as stated before, and its damage is increased by 50%, also as stated before. The developer's note here is that lowering the duration of the damage over time effect to make it punchier so that the sequential Devouring Plagues don't overlap, and this is accounting for potential overflow. This is exactly what I meant with the 6 second playing into our gameplay a lot better than the 12 seconds, especially once we get more haste. And speaking of crit, Devouring Plague will now properly critically strike and is a level 20 learned spell. Okay, let's take a deeper look at our new spell, Dark Thoughts. Dark Thoughts is a passive learned at level 16, and for each of your damage over time effects on the target, your Mind Flay and Mind Seer have a 2% chance to instantly add a charge of Mind Blast, causing it to be an instant cast and allowing it to be cast while channeling Mind Flay or Mind Seer within 6 seconds. Dark Thoughts can stack up to 5 times for situations where the Shadow Priest will of course proc many in a short time. This is a nice way of weaving Shadowy Insight, a former talent, into our actual gameplay through the 2% chance, but that 2% chance is in my opinion quite low. A 10% chance, which is what we will have once it stacks up 5 times, is still a bit low in my opinion, and this may actually be a bit weak, but I'll keep you updated once thoroughly tested. Okay, let's get into our talents, and here we will find arguably the most changes overall. In our tier 15 talent row, Shadowy Insight has been removed. Shadow Word Void has also been removed. And Death and Madness is now available in this tier. We also get a new talent here, Unfurling Darkness. After casting Vampiric Touch on a target, your next Vampiric Touch is instant cast and deals 155% of spell power as shadow damage instantly. This effect cannot occur more than once every 15 seconds. Very interesting talent, more so even when paired with Misery, or in return when paired with using our new and upcoming talent, Searing Nightmare. The 15-second restriction is fine in my opinion. This is a talent that could easily become very powerful, so limiting it somewhat early is a good idea at first. In our level 40 talent row, we also have some updates. A new talent, Psychic Link. Mind Blast deals 60% of its damage to all targets afflicted by your Vampiric Touch within 40 yards. Most of us know this talent as a former PvP talent, and this is an incredibly nice change to our AoE. This allows every Mind Blast to hammer down on every target essentially affected by our dots, which could definitely see us competing strongly in AoE situations. Okay, let's move on to the tier 45 talent row, where we'll see some shocking changes. Lingering Insanity has been removed. Honestly, I never thought that I would say that, but the day has actually come. I will gladly repeat that. Lingering Insanity has been removed. Dark Void has also been removed. And we get a new talent, Searing Nightmare. Instantly deals shadow damage to all enemies around the target and afflicts them with Shadow Word Pain. If the enemy is already afflicted by your Shadow Word Pain, Searing Nightmare deals double damage. Only usable of course while channeling Mind Flay, or rather Mind Seer to balance it out. Now, this not only sounds like a super fun talent to use, but also like an incredibly strong talent to use. We need to test this thoroughly though before seeing how good or, well, how bad it is, but all in all, this will be a nice substitute or replacement for Dark Void, which is good of course. Okay, so the other new talent in this row is Damnation, which instantly afflicts the target with Shadow Word Pain, Vampiric Touch, and Devouring Plague free of any cost. It's on a 45-second cooldown though, and this sounds like a ridiculously strong talent in theory, also a lot of fun. This talent is another standing proof, however, that our Voidform playstyle will be a thing of the past when not playing with Legacy of the Void, but will be a thing of the past in general anyway, to be honest, since Voidform is locked behind a cooldown either way. Tell me whether or not you like that in the comments. Are you going to miss our old Voidform? Let's have an F in the comments for the departure of the old Shadow Priest, guys. An F in the chat, my friends. Okay, moving on, we have an update on Void Torrent, and it of course now no longer pauses your insanity while used, but instead now refreshes the duration of your shadow damage over time effects on the target while it's channeling. This could potentially make Void Torrent viable again. We'll have to wait and test it, but it's definitely still competing with some very strong competitors within its talent row. In and of itself, this sounds pretty neat though. Finally, we'll have a look at our level 50 talent row, which is our final talent row as well. Dark Ascension has been removed. Legacy of the Void is redesigned. Voidform no longer has a duration, however, during Voidform your insanity will drain increasingly fast until it reaches 0, and Voidform of course ends. Voidform increases spell damage by an additional 5%. Surrender to Madness has a reduced cooldown of 90 seconds on top of it now, or rather its cooldown has been reduced to a 90-second cooldown all in all. We also get another new talent, and that one is called Ancient Madness. Entering Voidform increases your critical strike chance by 30% for 15 seconds, reducing its effect by 2% per second. This sounds like an okay talent at the start of an expansion, I guess, but I almost feel as if it loses strength with more stats, but well, we'll have to wait and see and test it. Finally, we have another PvP talent that's new, and it's called Lasting Plague. Devouring Plague's duration is increased by 6 seconds. Okay, now the hardest part of this video, but one that many of you guys have been waiting for, my thoughts on these changes. Personally, I'm very excited to see these changes take effect, and I feel as if they'll be good for the spec as well. At this point, we really needed some significant changes in order not to feel weak in Shadowlands, and a lot of our core mechanics, especially so Voidform, began to fail at the seams, because things that made it strong in the past, like our artifact weapon in Legion, or our Azerite essences and traits in BFA, are simply not in the game anymore at this point. The spec was always incredibly reliant upon these factors in order to be competitive, and to not even work, or rather to even work functionally, and it's not even working functionally if they are not in the game. These changes push the Shadow Priest into an entirely new direction. One where these external factors are theoretically not needed any longer, and our damage will solely rely on dots and rotational factors rather than external powers. Whether or not these changes are exactly what we want, well, that remains to be seen in the upcoming days, but overall I am personally very happy. And with that being said, I am now officially stepping onto the hype train for Shadowlands, and I hope that you guys haven't taken up all of the seats. Hey, you? Yeah, get out. No, that's mine. Let me know what you think though. How are you liking these changes? Can you see them helping the spec, or do you think they could potentially hurt it? Be sure to let us all know in the comments below, I'd be very excited to know. A special thanks as always to my supporters over at Patreon, and if you want to join the discussion with all things priest related, then be sure to join our Discord server with the link in the description box below. A special thanks to all priest theory crafters, philosophers, beta testers, and everyone involved in the vast expanses of our community who have voiced their opinions and made these changes come alive. I think that this is proof that our voices are heard, and you should continue to express them. Now as always, have a good one my friends, get very, very excited for Shadowlands, and I will see you all in the next one.